Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not want to suggest that I would malign the Durbin Amendment. I think, like all policy around here, some of it worked, some of it may not work. We always got to look at refreshing things based on the circumstances of the day. Mr. Kim, just to go back to the GAO report, can you talk about just a little bit more about the effect that the Durbin Amendment has had on banking in general? The things that you're most concerned with? Give me the top two, if you have two.
So the GAO report, you don't have to take my word for it. Take the Government Accountability Office, found it was among the top 5 laws and regulations most cited as having significantly affected the cost and availability of basic banking services. So that's a statement. There's other arguments about those things, but that's a fact.
As you're going through this, also the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond indicated that nearly 99% of the savings realized from the Durbin Amendment were not passed back to the consumer. I mean, I think we're here ostensibly, I'm not a cheerleader for businesses, I'm a cheerleader for consumers. And so I'm trying to figure out if we're considering policy here that's going to have a net benefit to the consumer, it would suggest that the Durbin Amendment didn't. Is that accurate?
That's what that study would say. That's what the facts in that study would say. Now, figuring out exactly how price changes are passed on is a complicated thing, and the Durbin Amendment's been a long time ago, but that is the fact in the study.
I want Mr. Cantor, if you want to briefly respond, although I'm the last one here, so I may be able to indulge the chairman a little bit. Not too long, but.
Yeah, so there's two quick things. One, on the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, they made clear, actually, it does not say what some of the credit card industry says. Their study was a survey, didn't look at any actual economics of pass-through. They just did a survey of folks. And so it could not be relied on to say whether it was pass-through or not. And they also had bias issues they flagged in their survey.
Could it be fair to say, though, that if it's at 99%, there may have been an unhealthy amount that didn't go back to the consumers?
No, because they also asked the question wrong. See, merchants don't set their prices by saying, hey, this cost went down, now I'm lowering this price. What they say is, what's the market? And I got to compete with the guy down the street. And so over time, their profit margins become very narrow, like Ms. Corrett indicated, and it goes down to their cost. We all know that's how competitive markets work. So asking it was the wrong way to get at it.
I want to get to something else. I just want to see if my first impression, when we talk about the dollar amount increasing as the transaction amount increases, is it also fair to say, Mr. Sheedy, Ms. Kirkpatrick, that there's also a proportionate amount of risk and potential default in payments involved? I mean, isn't a part of the rationale behind the percentage going up is that there's a risk of fraud in some of those, that you've got to recapture it, right?
Yeah, that assumption is correct. As volumes increase, the risk of fraud increases, and we've seen.
Talk a little bit about card not present and additional rising costs in the area of the internet transactions and additional risk that you've got to recoup some of the cost or you can't have an operational business, something that's important for our consumers.
Yeah, MasterCard is spending billions of dollars to protect consumers against online fraud. And certainly as volume increases, fraudsters get more sophisticated. And that means that MasterCard has to invest more to protect against that fraud. And we've spent billions of dollars to protect consumers against fraud. Just last year, one of our cyber and security tools prevented $10 billion in fraud for consumers across the card-not-present environment.
Mr. Sheedy? And then I'm going to come, Ms. Corrett, I'm saving you for last.
Oh, great.
Senator, thank you. The consumers want to transact online. They enjoy the convenience. Merchants find that they can reach new customers and lower their costs to provide services online. The difficulty is the way that the system works at the moment, as safety and security has been our high priority, there's still too much fraud, there's still too much uncertainty. So one of the changes that we're making in April, then we created an incentive through interchange. Interchange just isn't a pass-through, it's also a mechanism by which we can make the system more safe and more secure. With one of the changes that we made in April, We are seeing a rapid adoption of these secure digital tokens to better authenticate transactions online so that consumers and merchants can more safely and assuredly transact. That's good for everybody. It's good for merchants, good for consumers.
Isn't it fair to say that if we were to go in and dramatically decrease what you could charge to recoup the cost of your operations, that you'd have to take a look at the risk mix of people that you'd be even willing to issue credit cards to? I mean, wouldn't some of the most credit challenged people be hurt the most by this if you're having to make a business decision about the population you could serve?
Well, one way to answer your question, Senator, is when interchange has been price regulated by governments around the world and other markets, you see a narrowing of the issuance of credit cards in those countries. And
That's logical.
And those fees to those consumers end up going up, and the features and the benefits they get from those cards go down.
Yeah.
And we think that would be a horrible outcome.
Ms. Corrette, I'm very sensitive. We got a lot of retailers in North Carolina, across the nation, a lot of the recipients of Paycheck Protection Program, a number of other things that we implemented in response to the impact of COVID was to recognize that we've got a lot of businesses out there on the bubble. And I know that your sector is struggling mightily with some of the shutdowns and other things that we've been dealing with. But let's assume that the fees were cut in half. Would that solve all your problems in your industry? Or the answer in the laugh is all I needed. I mean, a part of what we need to do, if we're talking about having a meaningful impact and a reduction in consumer prices, there's a lot of other policies that we have to talk about here. It's not going to make a big difference. You've got a lot of supply chain problems. You've got a lot of inflationary problems. Tell me a little bit about if you could ask Congress to act on any policy matter that would help the retail industry, would this be in the top of the list, or are there other things that we should be looking at to fix the fundamental problems that businesses like yours are suffering through?
Senator, thank you so much for asking that question. And if you will indulge me for 1 second, I'd like to...
I'll indulge you as long as the chair will.
Well, hopefully the chair will also indulge me. I'd like to go back to the fraud question, because there's a very important fact that has not been stated, which is the merchant bears the cost of online fraud. So when card is not present, the merchant bears the cost of that fraud. And what has happened through COVID and through natural consumer behaviors is the mix of shopping has moved online. So our costs are also going up from that perspective. And we're talking about the costs that these guys have invested, which I believe they have, in terms of anti-fraud. I just think it's really important to remember we're paying the cost of online fraud. That said, so to answer your question in terms of what I would want, the credit card swipe fee issue is one of the biggest issues that we have that I think that that the government has a role in. I don't know today what the government could do related to our inability to source toilet paper. That's actually that's the beginning of the pandemic, so we have plenty of toilet paper now. But credit card fees, as I said before, we operate on a 1% profit margin. Bank fees today are our third largest cost. We actually pay more in bank fees than we make. What we are looking for is fair competition. Not asking for huge regulatory things and caps and decreases. Look, if you want to have decreases, I'll take them. But that's not what we're asking for. What we're asking for is to create a level playing field so that there's competition. What Doug said before is exactly right. Competition works. And in this industry, there isn't any. And I do believe that's the role of our government, is to create level and fair playing fields.
I think, I'm going to have a hearing this afternoon that's kind of loosely related to this subject, but I also think it's something that we in our banking, in my capacity in banking committee, we should take a look at that. I believe in hyper competition. I think that it's incredibly important. If there is a basis for anti-competitive behavior, we've got a division in the DOJ to deal with it. But I think a lot of the things that we can do to kind of ease the burden and address these issues, I look forward to taking up in the banking committee. Thank you all.
Thanks, Senator Tillis. By virtue of the miracle of Zoom, I think we'll join the senator from Minnesota. Are you